This is entitled As Mayor of the City. As mayor of the city, this is a great responsibility. Of course, it will try and steal from your tranquility. To do the job, it takes desire, not one for hire. It takes a bold soul, but you can reach your goal. It takes sensitivity and a whole lot of activity. It takes a person with divine connections, for there will be times you'll need special directions. It takes prayer, for you just don't want to beat at the air. It takes wisdom, so you can benefit from freedom. It takes a sharp mind, for many want to see you in a bind. It takes giving others respect, so you won't end up suspect. It takes knowing who your friends are, so you can travel far. It takes a willingness, and it doesn't hurt to try a little tenderness. It takes toughness to deal with the roughness. It takes a seeing eye while praying over your pie. It takes stability, for you will face hostility. It takes humility, along with dependability. It takes credibility and a whole lot of responsibility. It takes caring and it takes sharing. It takes being a blessing while others you are addressing. It takes discretion and intercession. It takes possessing the land as you walk before man. It takes a strong heart, but you can do your part. It takes going in the lion's den to being concerned about the prison pens. It takes sleep and knowing that it's okay to weep. It takes love and knowing that the King watches from above. It takes help, for you can't do everything yourself. It takes knowing who you really represent to make a dent. It takes money being spent right down to the last cent. It takes discernment while dealing with the government. It takes knowing you have the potential, knowing the call is essential. It takes being able to receive compliments while being able to spot false pretense. It takes an all-seeing eye. It pays to have a friend in the sky. It takes being able to deal with frustration while not being captured by temptation. It takes walking with them that are whole. Then you'll not have to worry about what's being stolen. It takes common sense and being concerned about national defense. It takes being able to comprehend and a willingness to defend. It takes remembering those who have pretended to keep from getting rear-ended. It takes being at one's wit's end and not going off the deep end. It takes remembering when you were 19 and knowing a smoke screen. It takes coming through a mob scene and going to a place that's serene. It takes being gracious to the poor and some nights walking the floor. It takes being able to let off steam and knowing there's no impossible dream. It takes knowing who is the charter member and who is the gang member. It takes knowing the difference between academics and epidemic. It takes teaming and not scheming. It takes having a gut feeling and being aware of dirty dealing. It takes a respect for peanut butter and jelly and not having weak knees and a yellow belly. It takes holding on to the fact while being yelled at. It takes not being a nervous Nelly and not coming out smelly. It takes knowing your elder while dealing with the welder. It takes a new reproach concerning the prison cell and not spending too much time at the wishing well. It takes dealing with the personnel to being aware of those who kiss and tell. It takes being aware of the tattletale while talking on the cell. It takes knowing about William Tell and staying out of the isolation cell. It takes knowing a city that needs to be healed and being aware of who should really yield. It takes knowing what has been misspelled and being aware that something has been withheld. It takes a willingness to go on the battlefield and being bold enough to appeal. It takes knowing a raw deal and being able to enjoy a happy meal. It takes being able to laugh when you want to cry and dealing with a sigh. It takes not being henpecked to know who is really the suspect. It takes knowledge of the lie detector and being aware of the private sector. It takes being aware of the metal detector and the public sector. It takes being a conscientious objector and being aware of the stage director. It takes dealing with high tech and with the effect. It takes knowing the difference between the spot checked and the shipwrecked. It takes dealing with the stiff-necked and the rough-necked. It takes dealing with the cause and effect and not being afraid to double check. It takes respect for others and compassion for mothers. It takes a willingness to fight when you know it's right. It takes the right time to move so you won't get stuck in a groove. It takes saying goodbye to fair weather friends, even if you have to walk through the lion's den. It takes knowing who's got your back and knowing they are not slack. It takes having an ear to hear and knowing that I am near. It takes knowing the difference between a security check and playing with a full deck. It takes remembering the fig leaf to being concerned about the fire chief. It takes enjoying roast beef and holding on to your belief. It takes knowing about those who said it and being aware of those who spread it. It takes knowing the difference between misread and misled. It takes knowing the difference between misleading us and completing us. It takes being a goal setter and not a forgetter. It takes being a vote getter and dealing with a crank letter. It takes a paper shredder until times get better. It takes dealing with the business meeting and not getting caught up in competing. It takes knowing who you are and knowing there's only one superstar. It takes not being greedy, but remembering the needy. It takes knowing you are a thoroughbred and marching straight ahead. It takes getting up on the wrong side of the bed and not losing one's head. It takes eating your daily bread and leaving some things unsaid. It takes being high-bred, but not spoon-fed. It takes agreeing to disagree and going to Washington, D.C. It takes being treated as a VIP and staying worry-free. It takes giving the third degree even to the employee. It takes talking on NBC if need be. It takes knowing that by yourself you are not out on a limb, and this is not a whim. It takes being privy to inside information and not being afraid of confrontation. It takes guts to oversee a city. It takes facing displeasure but there is hidden treasure. It takes learning and keeping your burning. It takes dealing with panic attacks and not letting things slip through the cracks. It takes being on the right side of the tracks and dealing with brass tacks. It takes staying away from the wolf packs and staying away from yakety yaks. It takes dealing with setbacks and staying away from sad sacks. It takes getting on the fast track, but playing like a fullback. It takes having the known facts and playing like a quarterback. It takes rising again and appreciating the win. It takes going on the warpath and dealing with the aftermath. It takes being willing to take flight in order to go to a new height. It takes putting out the welcome mat and turning up the thermostat. It takes being a diplomat and not a fraidy cat. It takes dealing with format and this and that. It takes knowing when you smell a rat and not being a copycat. It takes dealing with bureaucrat and not playing tit for tat. It takes being laughed at and wearing a hard hat. It takes being prepared for a political debate and not hyperventilate. It takes greeting the Secretary of State and being ready to elaborate. It takes knowing how to interrogate and the boldness to investigate. It takes knowing how to officiate and how to participate. It takes pulling one's own weight and not procrastinate. It takes being up to date in order to penetrate. It takes knowledge of your opponent and not speculate. It takes being able to tolerate what's on your plate. It takes facing a disaster and dealing with the newscaster. It takes being steadfast and others you will outlast. It takes being motivational and inspirational. It takes having passion and not being caught up in fashion. It takes organization and mobilization. It takes visualization and determination. It takes more than a dream. There must be some steam. It takes a made-up mind and not lagging behind. It takes the right attitude to get to the predestined altitude. It takes the right step and knowing when to ask for help. It takes being clear about your mission and staying in good condition. It takes knowing and showing, talking and walking, sharing and caring. It takes being used to bring about change, even when people act strange. It takes knowing where you work and where you live. It takes sitting in your rightful seat and being able to give. It takes favor so you won't get caught up in labor. It takes looking higher than man to help you to stand. It takes knowing that you were sent while others went. It takes knowing there's a higher level and holding in one's hand a shovel. It takes silencing the word how. It takes a 5-letter word called faith right now. You have the right to choose win or lose.